Hi, so my content presentation is on the Eleusinian mysteries, particularly focusing on that in relation to Demeter and Core. An overview of what I will be talking about. So, what are the Eleusinian mysteries? Well, they originate with the next subject we'll be talking about, specifically the Greek goddesses Demeter and Core below. So the Eleusinian mysteries are basically rites and rituals that we do not have a lot of information about that are meant to be a part of the worshiping of Demeter and Core, otherwise known as Persephone. A lot of the information that we do get and that a majority of what is on my slides is based off of is from the Homeric hymn to Demeter. So this will be including specific cults that worship both specifically Demeter and Core as mother and daughter, and the rituals and rites that we know of from those cults. As said before, there's not a lot of information given on specific rites and rituals because these Eleusinian mysteries really are mysteries, and the details that scholars do have, especially including later rites and rituals that were brought into the public in different cities of Greece, lost a lot of their not symbolism, but like power, importance, and intrigue, because a very intriguing part is the fact that it's mysterious, and if you are not an initiate of Demeter and Core, you do not know about these rites and rituals. So on this slide specifically, there are two different pictures. In the top right, there is a picture that is a representation of the origin of or initiation of mysteries of the Eleusis. The figure on the lower right is Core, and her mother is in the upper scene, having to do with the representation of the greater mysteries. Also on the right, directly above her, as you can see, her mother's wearing a crown, which she is depicted in both on this plaque and in a bust that you will see later in this slideshow. The other image in the top left is supposed to be a, as it says, relief of the Eleusinian divinities. Specifically, Demeter and Core, I believe, are to be two on the middle left, one seated and one standing. As in other reliefs, it could be assumed that Demeter is sitting and Core is standing behind her, although I'm not positive looking at this, and none of them have heads. So the great Eleusinian mystery, which is what's being depicted in the upper part, or the initiation of which is being depicted in the upper half of the plaque on the right, occurred annually and was an Athenian festival with the local name of Mysteria. it was in autumn, or for us, the month of September. So the dates are from about the 15th to the 22nd, because there were certain rites or rituals that needed to take place a couple days before and a couple days after the week of the main festival. One of these is that on the 13th, there were an adolescent militia group that would meet priests on the road between Athens and Eleusis that would meet them to bring them, the priests, back safely with their sacred objects that would go to the Eleusinian in Athens and be housed there safely as a part of the beginning of the festival. On the 15th, there would be a sacrificial piglet that would be bathed in the sea to later be sacrificed and then eaten before a 3-day fast. During the 3 days of fasting, initiates would need to remain indoors and isolated from others. The Hierophant would then address the people, or rather initiates, who would be assembled on the Agora on the 19th. They would then begin their procession from Athens, a total of, I think, 22 kilometers to Eleusis. They would go over 2 bridges along this sacred road. The first bridge in particular would lead to the initiates being mocked and insulted as a part of this ritual. And the second bridge is significant because it was too narrow for wagons or chariots, and the initiates would have to walk. Initiates were meant to focus on, and a lot of what we know of the rituals focuses on imitating Demeter's mourning when she loses Corey after she is taken from Olympus. Maybe Olympus is the Roman term. I'm sorry if it is. So the fast is broken when they arrived at Demeter's temple or sanctuary at Eleusis with a drink that included barley and other grain mixed with water. That is what the queen offered Demeter when finding out who she really was, and that she was a goddess and not just another old woman taking care of her son. This occurred right before Demeter asked for that temple to be built, or sanctuary. Once initiates arrive, they are then confined to the Teleistron, or Great Hall. So within the walls of this Great Hall or temple, the rites are unknown. Again, that is a big part of the mysteries, is keeping them a mystery. We know that in the end, initiates were praised for gifts of wealth and life. As has been said, this was focused around harvest and agriculture time, being in September, and in the autumn, the specific great Eleusinian mystery, versus some of the lesser ones, which will occur in the winter or springtime. And better life after death, which I believe specifically relates to the story of Corey and her in one way becoming Persephone, because Persephone is what she is referred to as in terms of being Hades' wife. So Demeter specifically was one of the 5 born from the Titans Rhea and Kronos. So she was the sister of gods such as Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, and she was the goddess of corn, and her power included fertility of the earth and grain. So that is why she is worshipped around the agricultural cycle, and she also teaches humans or mortals how to cultivate and plant crops, mainly grain. She is worshipped in every city because of this being so vital to the daily lives. Having food is essential for these humans, mortals, initiates, whatever you would like to call them in this case. She was also known by the cult title of Desmophorus, which is for law-giving, as a part of a women's festival that occurred yearly and is more common and they're more known about than having to do with the Eleusinian mysteries. Obviously, as has been mentioned, or at the very least hinted at, she is the mother of Kori. So Demeter, in the pictures to the right, she is the bust on the top left, where she is depicted with her crown as well. And she is, I am pretty sure, on the left of the 2 headless statues. On the right is Kori. She is also the one sitting down in the image directly below her bust. She is the one sitting down and Kori is standing behind her. And then Kori is seated in the image on the bottom right with her feet up on a footstool. And that was a part of several statues. And there's also one of Demeter sitting that I assume would have been next to each other or near each other. So Kori, or Persephone, is the daughter of Demeter. She's the daughter of Demeter and Zeus, most referred to. So Kori specifically is the name when stressing this relationship between the 2 goddesses. Persephone is particularly when stressing that she is the wife of Hades, or queen of the underworld, which she becomes after Hades takes her from her home with her mother, and while she's picking flowers, down to the underworld to be his bride, because of the value of marriage rituals and how this instance or myth is viewed by various cults. She can be seen as the protector of marriage and of the women's sphere, including children, and rituals and rites that went along with that included the picking of flowers before the wedding and other such aspects. So I mentioned this before when talking about the great Eleusinian mysteries. So if you can see my mouse, this is Athens, and then it is said to be 22 kilometers to Eleusis, sorry. And there as mentioned, was a sacred road going along that they would follow. Just to situate us, especially for the next part of the story, where I will talk about specifically the Homeric hymn to Demeter and look at the sanctuaries. So, after pointing out the location of Eleusinian, I think it is important to maybe reiterate or just have you reread these lines from the Homeric hymn to Demeter, where Demeter is pretty much demanding that this temple be brought up in her name, and so that she can be worshipped. And from the start, she makes it clear in these lines that the rites that will be performed relating to her and to receive her favor, for her to answer your prayers in return, are intended to be sort of secret, or at least that's what I get from this implication. And this is specifically said to the queen of Eleusis and her daughters after they find out that she, who has been disguised as an old woman after coming down to Earth to look for and mourn, which is the mourning they are imitating in the festival, her daughter Corey being gone from her. And so this is after they find out that she is not actually an old woman. She reveals herself, as you can see by the first lines, as the goddess Demeter. And this is just one instance of Demeter making demands. She also demands that Zeus bring Corey back from the underworld after finding out her whereabouts. And this should be taken even more seriously than just getting her favor here, because it is not only the lives of the mortals or humans that she is threatening when she causes a famine and pretty much stops the food supply. She is also essentially cutting off all of the worship and prayers from the humans, because they will be gone. They won't be there to pray to Zeus or any other god, but especially Zeus, who she is specifically asking for her daughter back from, and for him to make Hades bring Persephone back, or Corey, for stressing that relationship here. She does not know, however, that while circumstances are debated, Corey has eaten a pomegranate seed from the underworld and will need to go back. So when Zeus does sort of quote unquote get Corey back for Demeter, it is only in part. And then Corey is meant to live part of the year with her mother, and then has to spend part of the year in the underworld with Hades, where she is queen. So these are pictures of a couple sanctuaries whose builds or ruins range throughout the almost 2,000 years that the Eleusinian mysteries were, or the rites of them were performed. Specifically in the center is from Eleusis, Greece, and it shows the hill that Demeter was referring to in the lines from the Homeric hymn that was on the previous slide. I also wanted to include the areas where temples for Demeter and Kor, or sanctuaries, had been in other countries such as Italy and Turkey. Also on the left, the reason there is a sort of map sketch below is because there was a church built on top of the temple ruins. There's also a supplementary video to see the entire view of the ruins at Eleusis and just how much the city suburb of Athens that it now is butts up with where these ruins are. So the cults, rituals, and rites. So obviously the cults revolved a lot around agriculture and earth fertility, having to do with Demeter, but also Demeter bringing back Corey and their relationship. Ignore the second bullet point. It was meant to be cut out and is on another slide. Some of the worshippers of just Demeter alone became worshippers of both Demeter and Corey, as mentioned. As far as those involved in the Eleusinian mysteries, the only things barring them from being initiates were being a murderer, those who did not speak Greek, and those who were polluted. So you were able to be initiate if you were a woman, a slave, or free. And the concern for agriculture and food shifts to a stress of being happy or having a better life after death. And I think that is probably related to the fact that Corey is Persephone and is queen of the underworld. So rituals, as we have discussed, is there's the annual festival, the main or greater Mysteria in autumn. There's also a spring celebration and lesser or little Mysterias in winter. I think it said the months were February and March, so I might consider that spring as well, depending on what climate you're in. Also, they did a specific type of animal sacrifice, which was sort of mentioned with the piglet when talking about the origin of the mystery and what they do with the greater Eleusinian mystery. And other rites discussed are purification, such as the bathing of the sacrificial piglet, but also being pure was something that was stressed, hence no murderers or people who were considered polluted, although I couldn't quite get a definition on what that meant. There was also the rite of fulfillment and other nocturnal rites that are still essentially unknown to us for the most part, outside of their names. And the Demeter's rites continued at the site of Eleusis for nearly 2,000 years. And on this page, we have depiction of Eleusinian deities / gods and rituals. On the top left specifically are 2 decrees of the Eleusinians that do not involve Demeter and Kor, but did involve Hercules and one other law, I believe. The top right is the sacrificial altar that had been built over, but shows the altar rather than as a table, but as a pit, which is what Demeter had asked for in the Homeric hymns. And below are, bottom left has to do with the funeral or burial rites, and includes not only Demeter and Corey, but also her as Persephone with Hades. And on the bottom right shows people lining up in front of what I think is supposed to be Demeter depicted on the right. And or Corey, because it does say that this again had to do with the resurrection of the dead in the hereafter. Now, that did not believe that they did not, that does not mean that they did not believe, or that they did believe you could avoid death, but rather that they, like had been said, had put a particular stress on being happier or living a better life after their death. So, in conclusion, the Eleusinian mysteries that originate with the story of Demeter and Corey, and involve their cults, rituals, and rites, are mostly a mystery and remain unknown, but as suggested before, that gives them a lot of their power. And I think it relates to what we've talked about before with the theatrical aspect making an impact. And these two goddesses are able to give amazingly wealth in this life, which I think specifically relates to Demeter, and a happy existence after death with Persephone or Corey, as a not only a good balance, but a well-rounded interaction between the two goddesses and their initiates of a give and take, although we do not know a lot about what initiates gave to them in order to receive this peace while living. Thank you. I'm sorry for any mispronunciations or stutters. And this is my bibliography.